song, so or whatever it is.
We won't go through a track by track breakdown.
Track by track.
I could do 40 minutes on 100,000 years.
That's right. On a live, you can, yeah.
And the Paul Stanley raps alone, that's 30 minutes.
Yeah.
Don's, I think I'd have to check my notes, but I'm pretty sure I think Don gets those. So up first, I've got the master of all things 4 and 5 strings, Grammy Award-winning bassist and co-founder of legendary metal band Megadeth, Mr. David Ellefson. David, how are you today, my friend?
Doing well, thank you. Glad to be here.
And on the other end, I've got Emmy Award-winning comedian, co-host of That Metal Show for 14 seasons, and Metal Blade recording artist, Mr. Don Jamieson. Don, what's up, buddy?
Hey, what's going on, man? You picked a great topic for today, and I know David's as big a Kiss fan as I am, if not bigger, so this should be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I think we'll have a blast. And first and foremost, I appreciate both of you being here. Listeners appreciate you being here. So let's step into the Rockers Forum and take some open comments. It's open floor for both you gentlemen. Don Jamieson, we will start with you. Give us some quick comments, commentary about Kiss Alive.
Wow. Okay. Well, I mean, Kiss Alive 2 was my first record for Kiss as far as the live stuff. So this one always has the most special place in my heart. Yeah. But when I went back for this one, I gotta say it was almost like the tale of two bands. Whereas sort of Kiss Alive 2 is I don't know, it's just a little more upbeat, a little friendlier. Kiss Alive was darker. That whole middle section from She, Watching You in 100,000 Years, like just that meat of the album. It's like it's dark and it's it's just
a gnarly kind of energy, wasn't it?
Yeah, and of course the just seeing the crowd on the back and obviously with Kiss everything was visual. So for a youngster like me, that just all that stuff it's almost overload in your brain.
Yeah. How about you, Mr. David Ellefson?
Well, Kiss Alive was my second Kiss record. My first one was Destroyer, and I got it on cassette. So this was summer of 1976, right as it came out. I remember as a kid on the school bus radio, I would hear Shout It Out Loud next to Styx and Sweets and, BTO and everything else that was going on at that day. But I remember walking in, we had a little drugstore in town, and they had a vinyl and an 8-track and a cassette section, right? So I'd go in there, and I had to buy a friend of mine a birthday present, and I saw Led Zeppelin Presence, and I saw Kiss Alive, and I'm just going, come on. Like, I want to do that. I mean, there's no comparison. And I'll be honest with you, it's the reason I didn't become a big Led Zeppelin fan, single-handedly, because of the two record covers that were on display at that exact moment in my life. And I say that because I then went on to buy I got introduced to bands like Judas Priest, Unleashed in the East, because of the cover. AC/DC, If You Want Blood, You Got It, with Angus stabbing the guitar in his chest, with Bond, singing with his arm around his neck, because of the album covers. So album covers sold me on records and bands. And, I remember I bought my friend presents, and he never did say much about it. So I just assumed that's how much impact that one had. But eventually I think I heard Kiss Alive originally on 8-track. A friend of mine had it. And, anybody who is familiar with 8-tracks, they'd get right to this awesome part of the song, and it would fade out, change channels, and then fade back in. And but I remember going to my friend's house. It was a family neighborhood friend of ours, and they had it on vinyl. And I remember just sitting listening to it, just top to bottom in that living room. I mean, I remember visually where I was, just top to bottom listening to it. And I mean, it was a life changer. And of course, we go back, we read these Kiss books, we read Eddie Kramer, who mixed it. One of his biggest things with that record, it was one, as they say, the first, and we'll take their word for it, that it was the first live album where they had an audience looping the whole time that it played. Because I guess up to that point, most live albums, whether it was from Woodstock or Crosby, Stills, Nash Young, whatever, they'd sort of start, you'd hear kind of the crowd cheering, but then as soon as the band started playing, they faded the audience out so you could hear the music.
Yeah.
And Kiss Alive, as we learn, was, had this, like, they looped this audience, and I don't even know where the audience was from. It might have been from a Joni Mitchell show for all, I forgot. I think they tell where it's from, but there's this loop of this audience going the whole time. And it just created the ambiance of the record. And I agree with Don, everything that he just said. It was a dark album. The cover's dark. It looks demonic. It looks satanic. It looks like everything your parents would not want you listening to, which is
why we did.
Part of why we did. As you wear your Striper shirt right in front of the Kiss Alive record, you sort of absolve yourself of your sins of Kiss.
That's right.
But everything about it, the logos, the only fault I find with the cover, of course, is that Ace is playing his guitar upside down.
Yeah.
But, even as a young lad, I had just started playing bass right around that time. I'm going, all right, I get it. It looks better that way. I mean, even as a 12-year-old, I sort of got the aesthetic of it, but because, most of the big rock shtick and the aesthetics that my generation that we've grown up with, we learned from Kiss. Everything from putting the picks on the mic stand, the drum riser, the equal wall of amps. I mean, all of that is straight off of Kiss Alive. That is the first sort of model of, like, this is how it's done. This is how the big boys do it. Is from that record.
Unparalleled visuals, on all fronts. And
I love what Don said too about that dark period from She, Watching You.
Yeah.
I agree. That took you down a hole and it was cool musically. And I don't know if you know this, I think it was in Paul Stanley's book, he talked about, they opened the show that night in Cobo. I guess they recorded that over 5 cities or something?
Yeah, it was like 4 or 5, and I've got them here, but actually.
And the Cobo Hall show, they said they kind of against their better judgment, they decided that night to open the show with Rock Bottom, which was kind of a real buzzkill. Like, it really kind of fucked up the flow of the show. And they kind of took 2 or 3 songs to get, and we've done that with Megadeth, it doesn't happen much, but sometimes we go, let's start the show with this. And we're like, never again. Like, X-nay on that. So I guess that was one show that they did. And so, which is funny because Rock Bottom is one of my favorite songs on that record. Especially that version of it. The Dress to Kill version just didn't have quite the impact. There's a real weight of kind of, you can feel the just kind of, again, the darkness of the lyric of that song that in that recording. So it's ironic that it was the Ladies and Gentlemen Kiss, and then they opened with Rock Bottom, But it sounds great on the record regardless.
Well, that's 2 things we've got in common, starting with the fact that Rock Bottom is one of my favorite Kiss songs too. And David, I know the last time we talked, of course, Destroyer, I believe more specifically Detroit Rock City, a couple of your needle drop moments. Destroyer was also my first. And I want to real quick just set the stage, make a couple notes in addition to something you just mentioned. And those cities were Detroit, of course, Cobo Hall, Cleveland, Wildwood, New Jersey, and Davenport, Iowa. And those were the cities. And I actually had to go kind of freshen up on that because I at one point I had known that, but you start getting a little older, things start to kind of fade away as some of that detail tends to do. But no, Alive, of course, was the first live album and Kiss's 4th album. As we know, 3 studio albums had been released, which did not set the world on fire, would be a summary way to say it. But with respect, in my opinion, 3 great albums in terms of songwriting, but as I think the general consensus amongst Kiss fans would be, just didn't quite capture the essence of Kiss, didn't capture the energy of Kiss. And I think energy is a word we could come back to over and over and over and over. We already have maybe a couple times, but the energy we talked about, I think Don said dark energy from that one period, and we'll get into the track list. But fantastic track list. Also, it was, from my understanding, from what I can figure out and going back and reading up on a couple things, is that double live albums in that period especially were rare if they even existed. I know, and I believe it, you mentioned Paul's autobiography. I believe in Gene's autobiography, he talks about, Casablanca releasing a highlights of The Tonight Show, which was a double album and essentially was a double live album, even though it was highlights, that caused some real problems with the label because it was such an utter failure and caused some financial things. But to get into some quick quotes and tidbits here, just to set the stage for the album, 5 days after its release, Bill Aucoin let Bogart at Casablanca know that Kiss was going to leave the label. Bogart signed a $2 million check to retain the band, which I did not know. This was in an article from Mental Floss from July of 2018. I did not know that fact. That was total news to me. Greg Prado, which I believe, Don, you've had on your show. I've had on here, author of Take It Off, Kiss Truly Unmasked, a contributor for All Music, and also, I believe, Brave Words, rated Alive as 4.5 out of 5 stars, stated Alive remains Kiss's greatest album ever. Now we're going to talk about the dinosaurs over at Rolling Stone. In the new Rolling Stone album guide, the album was rated 4 out of 5 stars. Then it goes on to kind of give a backhanded compliment, saying a nonstop Kiss Krieg of 2-note guitar motifs, fake sounding audience noise, and inspirational chit chat. But then it was restated as the next best thing to being there, clearly. So,
you don't give a shit what they say.
Man,
I mean, it's funny. It's there's certain, look, you got to take publications for their knowledge of a genre. You know what I mean? And it's like people clamoring to get in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. It's like these guys are 60, 70 years old. There's a reason they're missing a lot. They're not in touch with that. Usually, at some point, some advisory committees come in and say, "Hey, look, we got to be inclusive here." I've been in several of those settings, and it's usually a wider scope that says, "Hey, what about this little subgenre cooking over here in the corner? It's making some noise." And Kiss was clearly one of those. And it's funny, Kiss Alive in a lot of ways would have been like if it basically that's the DVD Blu-ray release of Kiss, right? Because it was
Absolutely.
the first kind of big, even though it's not visual at all, because it's just an audio recording. In a lot of ways, there's a great visual there, and you're right. That always was the thing, is that if we need to get out, and Kiss had great management. I mean, Bill Aucoin really got it, man, and he for sure was the fifth Beatle in Kiss, for sure, of knowing how to sell the band, how to get the band out. That it was that thing that's like, look, man, if you could just see the band live, you'd get it. And again, there weren't VHS and DVD and Netflix, movies and stuff on bands. So this was the closest they could get, was if we can just sort of get this out there, people will get a better understanding. And clearly they did. And that was a day in the record business where artists would do 3 studio albums, and then they would sort of drop the live album. If it was, that was what would kick it over the edge. Frampton Comes Alive had that, Kiss, Grand Funk, there was and it was a double live album, the big gatefold thing, and probably a gazillion more. In fact, I was surprised when Foghat's live album came out and it was only a single album. I was disappointed. I'm like, what the hell is this? Why is it not a double album? But it was kind of the model of how they did, and I didn't know this, of course, because I was 12. But as I got into the business, later learned that those are some of the strategies, of how how these things worked. And it's interesting that having had these kind of records myself, where you do a record like Kiss Alive, and I don't know, maybe for Megadeth it would be Rust in Peace. It sort of sets the tone for the big one that's going to follow. And of course, the big one would be Kiss. It would be Destroyer.
Yeah.
And the irony with that they send out Detroit Rock City as the lead single, which I agree, amazing song, but it was some radio DJ somewhere flips it over, and what's this song, Beth? What's this all about?
Yeah.
Discovers this ballad that's just, it's incredible, and has no
there it was a
Kissisms.
B-side.
Yeah, no Kissisms to it at all. It's the opposite of Kiss, and yet it blew through the roof and made them all millionaires. And so basically they still get to tour on the benefits of that one song, and so it's amazing how just kind of the ironic twists. But it's in a lot of ways, Kiss Alive. That really was that. It not only was it, this is the last. If this doesn't work, we're out of tricks, kind of thing, which I think, you hear these stories of great businesses, be it Apple or whoever, you know, they go, this is it. If this doesn't frickin' work, we're out of business, you know. And yet it set the tone. I mean,
Yeah.
set the tone for the manager to go in and say, we're out of here, and then get a $2 million check.
Exactly.
That's a frickin' ball. That's a Peter Grant, Led Zeppelin ballsy move right there.
It's
you know?
like an all-in bluff. Don, I want to come to you in 1 second. I'm just going to give a couple more tidbits real quick. Alive did peak at number 9 on the Billboard Top 200. I had to go back and find that as well. So technically was a top 10 release. Also in 2003, the album was ranked again with all of our favorite hippie dinosaurs over at Rolling Stone, number 159 on the magazine's list of the 500 greatest albums of all time. And you know, so whether they want to insult them or whether they want to accept them on a given day, I guess at the end of the day, they eventually made the Hall of Fame, and they eventually had to and made the cover and had to force them to swallow their pride just a little bit. Number 26 from Guitar World on the list of 100 greatest guitar albums of all time. And in 2009, same magazine placed it at number 3 on their list of top 10 live albums. One quote that I love that I just wanted to share quickly was from Kim from Soundgarden. Alive was the first album I ever bought, and I wasn't alone. You can hear their influence all over metal and punk. Mr. Don Jamieson, do us the honors. You've got your vinyl there. Why don't you run us through the track list on Alive?
Yeah, and I wanted to say, David brought up a great point about, when you're 12, you're not thinking like, you don't know anything behind the scenes in the business.
Yeah.
Like when I was 12 and I listened to this, I didn't know one day I was going to be interviewing Ace Frehley and Peter Criss on my own heavy metal talk show. I didn't know any, when I listen to this record, it makes me long for the days when I didn't know any of the behind the scenes stuff, because now I know way too much. But,
and it was so much more pure then, right?
Yeah. And it always brings you back to that. And the notes inside and everything, are just still great. And then, of course, the cheap plug for the first 3 albums are in here, which you don't realize is a total marketing thing. And I think, David, the audience on here, if I remember Eddie Kramer said on Eddie Trunk's show, I think it's from one of the Super Bowls.
Nice. Well, if you think about, when you watch, that's funny, you watch like NFL, right? You watch Major League Sports, there's always this low din, this hum of the crowd, and NFL is probably one of the more, obviously it's a big stadium, so that was brilliant though. I mean, what a great idea to do that,
Yeah. And, so they come out obviously on side 1, they're pulling no punches, it's just boom, 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 Deuce, Strutter, Got to Choose, Hotter Than Hell, and Firehouse, right in a row. It's funny, I didn't realize this till recently, but the album starts with a Gene song, and then you don't have another Gene song for 5 more songs.
Yeah.
Which is, I guess they weren't as competitive back in the day, but it's like the voice you hear beginning the album, you don't hear again for another 25 or 30 minutes, which is strange. And in fact, you have to flip the record over to get to Nothing to Lose. And I think, something about Gene's, obviously he's a big influence on David's, but the thing that I always took from this album is bass playing was definitely a lot more clever than I think people realized.
Oh, man.
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, Gene, and again, he credits, certainly Gene and Paul both credit the Beatles and all that. And let's face it, they were my Beatles. I got into a big argument on a rock and roll fantasy camp with Mark Hudson about this, because he was yelling at me that I didn't know any Beatles songs. And he's right, I don't. And I told him, I said, listen, the Beatles came out the year I was born. So I missed it, In fact, Paul McCartney and the Wings, that was kind of my first introduction to that sound, if you will. But Kiss were my Beatles, and I've come to appreciate that, because a fan sent a letter to me one time and they said, why do you guys, people talk down about the Megadeth album Risk, because it wasn't a thrash metal record, right? It was a very different record. And it was a woman, and she said, I was only 13 at the time, and it was the very first record I bought, and that introduced me to Megadeth, and then I bought all the rest of your records. And I thought about that directly relating to me to Kiss. I didn't buy Hotter Than Hell. I bought Kiss Alive. And then I went back and bought the other 3. And then they even had a double or a triple album called The Originals. Remember that?
Yes.
Yep.
Right? And then that had a bunch of other cool fan stuff in it, and then moved forward into So I took that note seriously from that fan, because it made me realize, first of all, don't ever disrespect your own work, because it was your work at that time, and it was there for a reason. And it just made me also think about, we have no choice over the day and the year we were born, right? I mean that, and so we are going to be influenced by whatever pop culture stuff is around us, and I think that's what makes us Kiss fans so connected. Chances are we wear black T-shirts, or a dirtbag shirt at least. But there's a synergy. Most of us are into hard rock and metal. There's a lifestyle. There's probably a drink, a cigarette. There's a thing that we all kind of do. That's very synonymous with that. And and I mean, it's funny. Gene's bass playing in particular on this record. And it's funny, they still to this day start the show with Deuce. That's how powerful that was. I mean, that's like their anthem. It's a needle drop anthem moment for them that they usually start the show with Deuce. And you're right. Now it's more like a Gene song, a Paul song. Gene, Paul, Gene. You know what I mean? Like, you're right, yeah. And you see it. You know what I mean? They're kind of bouncing them back and forth.
You've done 2 songs now, Paul. It's my turn.
Yeah, exactly. And they're all great. So what do we care? You know what I mean?
Right,
it's flip a coin. We don't care. But yeah, I mean, Gene's and some of these lines on these, I mean, Strutter's just amazing, but the bass line is incredible. That's one of the first bass lines I learned, is a walking bass line, and I wouldn't figure out for years later that that's what Gene is kind of doing on Strutter. Got to Choose is just amazing. And like say Firehouse, I mean, that bass line in Firehouse is just, I mean, that was.
And Hotter Than Hell has that little bass lick at the end of the line there. And
yeah.
And who knew when we were 12 that Nothing to Lose was basically a song about trying to get anal sex from your girlfriend?
I know. That's the thing is, well, and even Deuce, right? I mean, what the hell is that? Like, you're worth a shit. I mean, what is that? I mean, no one's ever really come out and said, I mean, you've interviewed the guys. What is it? What is a deuce? I mean, we know one meaning of a deuce. Is that what it is? I'm sure.
You know what? I've never gotten a straight answer. I don't think anybody's ever gotten a straight answer on that.
And maybe we're not supposed to. Maybe that's one of the great mysteries of Kiss, we don't know what a deuce is, and Nothing to Lose is, taboo.
I was just going to say, profound point about the lifestyle and the impact of the album on the lifestyle. And it's crazy because every video I've shot so far, I had a black T-shirt on except today. But like you said, at least it is I am wearing the team jersey and is the dirtbag. So picking up where Don left off, flipping the record over, and you're into Come On and Love Me. And David, I wanted to tell you, I went out for a run the other day, was listening, and something about the digital one with the way it's mastered for Apple, the bass, I'm able to catch some of the bass lines in ways that I wasn't before. Man, that you mentioned Strutter, which I told you last time we spoke, my favorite Gene Simmons bass line, and there's a lot of similarities between Strutter and Come On and Love Me. There's that sort of half-step walk sort of going through there, and it's a really cool thing. Then you look at Parasite, and I think back to that quote from Kim from Soundgarden when you say it's all over punk and metal. Well, I don't know that it gets more punk or metal than Parasite. I mean, Parasite, what else can you say about it except just that full frontal assault of,
well, that one key right there, and I'll just pick up a guitar, that right, that is a very distinctive metal. Things are usually written in E or A, and then F sharp. Like Judas Priest is their default sort of solo bridge section chord change, and to write it in that, and that's an A song, right? Parasite.
Yes.
Yeah, right. It's an A song. So again, as a guitar player, that's a very thrash metal kind of riff, which is why, of course, Anthrax covered it, right? And they cover it, and so it's funny, the Ace songs, there weren't a lot of them, and of course, reading his book, he talks about records that he participated in, some that he didn't, but his style added a really different just a different flavor. And it's interesting that, you know, you read these Kiss books and also we kind of know this stuff, you know, they modeled so much of themselves after the Beatles, where everybody would write and especially everybody would sing.
Yeah.
So, you know, you'd hear these different voices, but it didn't sound random. It didn't sound like, who's this guy singing? What the hell is this? You know, Gene and Paul, very different, both lead singers, in my opinion. And then, you know, Ace, of course, wouldn't sing till Kiss Alive 2 Shock Me, I guess, Love Gun. But, you know, to hear Peter sing had his whole other distinctive style to his voice that was very cool, you know. I mean, Nothing to Lose, right? Is that the first time he comes in and sings?
Yeah.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
He takes the lead on, yeah.
Yeah, and the thing with Peter, too, is like, yeah, I guess even over the years, man, it always disappoints me that people kind of, they don't, not dismiss him as not a great drummer, but I don't think he gets the credit he deserves. I mean, I love those galloping drum fills that he does throughout the album.
Yep.
You know, his
Absolutely.
voice, I mean, he's got the soulfulness to his voice, but yet it still, you know, fits in with sort of the heaviness, but he's just got that real raspy, scratchy kind of vibe. I mean, Nothing to Lose is not, that song's not even worth playing live unless he's singing on it, and the drumming is fantastic. And if you go down the Kiss rabbit hole and watch concerts from around this time, I mean, you'll really see a Peter Criss that will really blow your mind out.
Yeah.
Just the intensity of his drumming and singing is just really out of this world.
Yeah, and you're right. And the tone, the drum tone on this record is unparalleled by anybody ever. I mean, they've got this sort of, it sounds big. It sounds like they're in Madison Square Garden. You know what I mean? And you're right out of the gate, right into Strutter. I mean, right out of the gate, bang. I mean, it just sets up the drum tone. And then, of course, we'll get into the drum solo here in a minute. But
yeah,
and then the flanger on the drums.
Oh my God, the flanging on the drum, that is just so clever. In fact, I think last time I saw Kiss, when they came through town on the End of the Road tour, I think they even had it live on Eric Singer's drums, because he does, you know, I love how they have Tommy and Eric actually do the Ace solo and the Peter drum solo. They intentionally go back and recreate the solos from this record. I mean, that's how important this record was to even today's Kiss, is that they go back and they grab that. And I got to be honest with you, I've taken note of that in Megadeth, that, you know, it's like, we want to see the sweatbands, the stretch jeans, in my case, the Jackson bass. Like, fans want to see, because I know as a Kiss fan what I want to see. I don't want to see the new modern souped up Kiss. Take me back, because often that's not what we're doing is on the stage, is we are taking people back to a point in time, and that's what they're paying us for. Take us back to our childhood, when there was no problems, there was no I didn't care about anything, you know, school sucked, so I bought your Megadeth, you know what I mean? So I get it. I mean, in Kiss, again, they've taught us so much, you know, about that psychology of that. And again, you see Kiss today, and there's so much of the Kiss Alive-isms in the modern day Kiss show that are, as a fan, they just take me back to being 12 years old again.
Absolutely. We picked up we left off rather at Parasite. So we've got She, Watching You, 100,000 Years, Black Diamond, Rock Bottom, and then we're wrapping up with Cold Gin, Rock and Roll All Night, and one of my personal favorites, Let Me Go Rock and Roll. So let's step into the rundown. Let's get a couple of questions and go around the table just a few times. I want to ask, first off, we've already talked about some of our first and earliest memories of Alive, maybe with the exception of me, and we can do without mine since I've got you two gentlemen here. But I do want to ask, and we'll start with Don on this one. Don, how did your perception of Kiss change upon hearing Alive for the first time?
Wow. Well, just that, again, that live albums, just in general, back in these times, especially in the 70s, those were the albums that turned you on to bands.
Yeah.
You know, unfortunately nowadays, live albums they're almost throwaways at this point, or they certainly don't have the importance that they had back then. There would be no Peter Frampton without the live album. There would be no Kiss without their live album. so, and Thin Lizzy's, same thing. Thin Lizzy was sort of just skating by, and Live and Dangerous was huge. So for me, I feel lucky that I grew up in a time where live albums were an event. And while Kiss was and still is a totally visual band, and there was no DVDs or VHSs, that told you everything you needed to. Like, you could see the concert if you just had this in front of you, because you could imagine what was going on. You didn't know at the end of Firehouse that Gene was breathing the fire, but just looking at the front, looking at the crowd in the back, you could imagine like what was happening on stage. So I love that. I love that it's an album that can make you see the concert.
Yeah. Well, as Kiss fans, and what I'd like to do is just step into one here where we can each talk about the individual members of the band, what they brought to the table. Don, you've already done a lot of that with Peter, and I have one thing with Peter that I'd like to add myself. As Kiss fans, we've kind of all heard the jabs about ability, musicianship. In my opinion, that usually comes from haters, or more likely those who have never actually even listened or experienced an actual Kiss album. So let's break down what those members bring to the table on a live, specifically from a musical nature. David, I'd like to start with you. You take Gene and Ace.
Well, look, I that's a good point about you don't know that he's breathing fire. He's at the end, and because he's holding the bass, right again. He's kind of just like doing
he's vamping,
yeah, right, doing this thing, wow, and he does the fire thing, and breathes fire. But also, how about the bass solo in 100,000 Years? That's when he's doing the blood thing, right? We didn't know this, right? The blood capsule thing and beginning 100,000 Years. Again, Cold Gin. Look, the Ace solo is so iconic. These solos were songs within themselves. His guitar solo, the Peter drum solo, these were compositions, and it taught me what a live solo is supposed to be. It's either going to be a piss and a beer break for the fans, because obligatory solo, or it's going to be a song within itself, and again, we learned that from this record, because they compose these it's almost like every note, every movement, every engagement of the band, and again, I credit Bill Aucoin with this, was intentional. Nothing was done as just a random jam session. Everything was very intentional. Gene and Ace singing on the microphone together. How cool that was, right?
Man.
Ace was kind of the roamer, right? He kind of, did his own thing
until he fell down, and
so, but also, again, Cold Gin was one of his compositions.
Yep.
And as we later learned, from the books, that finally Gene and Paul said, "Okay, enough now. We're not singing your songs anymore. You sing them. These are good songs. You need to have a voice in the band. You sing," which of course shocked me. But imagine if Ace had sung Cold Gin. I mean, you could just see him singing it,
It was cool because in the reunion tour '96, and I'm sorry to interrupt you, Dave. I was going to say, it was so cool when they put the makeup back on. Me being a 16-year-old in high school and seeing that for the first time, because I was born in 1980. So when I was born, they're on the way out of makeup within a couple of years. But when they put it back on and they come back, Ace is singing a verse of Cold Gin. Right. In the live show.
Well, and here's the thing too, that you hold that record up. There's a couple of other things. I see Kiss use Gibson guitars and Pearl drums because they want the best. Again, Bill Aucoin. He went out and he got him a freaking guitar endorsement and a drum endorsement. I think they were owned probably by the same company at that time. I don't know. Maybe they weren't. Norland Music, I think. And I could be wrong about that. But again, we didn't know that was an endorsement. That they gave us some free guitars, or they're selling us stuff cheap. That was huge. I wanted my drummer to have Pearl drums because Kiss used them. I wanted to have a Gibson bass. My first bass was a Gibson bass, and I talked my mom into buying it for me out of the local newspaper because that's what Gene had, and it didn't look anything like him and it didn't sound anything like him, but that's the impact that, and I later discovered a lot of the Gibson basses back in those days, they were kind of shitty, to be honest with you. They did Gibson could make a guitar. They never got the bass thing right, but now I walk in, me and Frank Bello walked into a music store, Chicago Guitar Exchange, I think it is, whatever it's called there. And we saw two Gibson grabbers and some rippers. And we're like, oh my God. So we both picked them up and started playing 100,000 Years on it. I mean, that's the impact of, of what Gene had, not just on me, but my friends and our genre.
Awesome.
That's the beginning of a good metal joke. David Ellefson and Frank Bello walk into a guitar shop.
Exactly. Take it. Go run with it, man.
I'll work on it when we're done.
Do that.
Hey, Don, talk about Paul Stanley, what he brings to the table in Alive.
Well, being that really, other than Gene's, fire breathing and the blood and stuff, he's the focal point. That's why he's shaking and shimmying and fluffing the hair but rhythmically, he's the Malcolm Young of that band. He keeps those rhythms steady. Because of that, Ace really, again, if you go down the rabbit hole with Kiss, it's like maybe one of the reasons Ace is always so on point is because, Paul keeps that steady rhythm going, and Ace just lays his stuff right over the top of it. And, David alluded to it before, but, Ace, you can sing or hum every one of his solos.
Absolutely.
So it's not about the technical proficiency.
No.
It's the sum of all the parts, and all those parts.
Dude, and how about the toggle switch?
Yeah.
I mean, you hear
turns
anybody
off
do
the
that
neck pickup.
in any jam session anywhere. Somebody goes, I mean, right there, you're straight to Kiss Alive. I mean, that's how impactful that was. That's the beginning of what song is that? Nah. That's the beginning of Cold Gin, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
when they hit that open chord and hold that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's just holding a chord. I mean, talk about less is more, So
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I want to say about Peter Criss real quick. And Don, I think you did a fantastic job of breaking down some things about Peter Criss. I want to say about Peter Criss quickly. If I were to write you down a list of top 10 drummers, Peter Criss is in there. Matter of fact, all three drummers from Kiss are in that top 10 for me. And I think I can back up Peter Criss's influence in one way. And it would also at the same time be a tribute to Vinnie Paul. And there was an article in Drum Magazine, which I subscribed to back circa 2007, 2008. He had a article in there. I believe it coincided with the first Hell Yeah release, and he talked about his influences. And I thought it was very cool to see him listing Peter Criss, talking about, matter of fact, he was referencing Alive specifically. He was also talking about Stuart Copeland from the Police. And but he was talking about Peter Criss in particular. Now you take a drumming style. Here's my point. You take a drumming style like a Vinnie Paul, and then you think about, he's saying Peter Criss was my influence to get to this. And I think that speaks to Peter Criss's influence. And here's one other thing. David, you brought up earlier about Eddie Kramer, about the sort of the hybrid fashion of how the album was mixed, how it was put together, the audience loop, the different corrections that went on in the studio. There was an article in 2015 that I managed to find through Ultimate Classic Rock, and it was written by Nick DeRiso. I hope I'm saying that correctly, but there's a quote in there. The live recordings were so heavily altered, only Chris's drum tracks remain untouched. Now, what's that tell you? That tells you that Peter Criss was rock solid in the pocket and kept immaculate time for his drum tracks to be unaltered, for them to build any corrections or any touch-ups that they needed to do on the rest of the album around those drum tracks. Any additional thoughts on that?
Well, that's very common, and I in one of the books, might have been Paul's book, he talked about it. He goes, why wouldn't we go in? Who wants to buy an album with out-of-tune guitars and vocals that are, maybe there's monitors feeding back.
Yeah.
That's the thing. Like, we've had that too in live albums where suddenly
Sure.
the side fills are feeding into the vocal microphones and creating this it's unusable. You have to recut some stuff. So again, as a professional, of course, but look, I don't want to speak to Paul Stanley for 1 minute because
go ahead.
I did not know this, but I guess Slade had an album called Alive, and that's why they called it Alive, right? So Kiss Alive, right. They were borrowing from Slade. And it's, funny, I never knew Paul's influence as a guitar player because he picked some very random chord voicings And
Mhm.
live, he'll play a little Stairway to Heaven, or he plays some Zeppelin things. So you can tell he's obviously a bit of a Jimmy Page fan. But he refers in his books to Slade, and I was not a big Slade fan. In fact, Quiet Riot probably made Slade more famous than any other band that I know of.
Me too.
But to hear these note choices and chord choices that Paul plays are very unorthodox, and his stuff is very complex to learn, because it's very unique, and I think he's never been given enough credit. Obviously, Ace is the lead guitar player, so he gets a lot of the sort of face time on the guitar. But Paul, that his guitar playing is incredibly inventive. And the other thing that I really enjoyed about him, it was learning about how he created his stage raps. Oh yeah, kind of this sort of, he said it gets kind of this Southern drawl, like Southern Baptist preacher, kind of talking in this slow,
Totally.
and this sort of swagger.
Now come on.
Yeah, and you think it's so easy, but I can tell you, because I'm not a front man, I know, because Don, you've seen my live shows. When I talk, people listen. I'm like E.F. Hutton. I can turn a place into a library like that, because I have this very narrative voice that people like key into what I'm saying and hey, quiet, he's talking, versus Paul, which is, oh yeah, come on, you people. And look, I'm not even doing him a disservice. We should have Frank Bello on here, because he could really give a good call for it. But Paul invented he is, again, there's solo tracks on YouTube of just his raps, because they're they're of legend, and that is not easy to be a front man. Name them. There's only Mick Jagger, Bono. Hetfield's great. Dave, of course, can. He can. But there's not a lot of people who can get up there, and especially not drop F-bombs. Most people get up on the mic, they get uncomfortable, and they just start dropping F-bombs. And to me, that's not a front man.
Yeah.
Well, Paul kept it very. Sorry, Dave.
Yeah.
Paul kept it very simple. Obviously, you look at it. You look at a guy like Ted Nugent. He's basically talking the entire concert.
While soloing.
While he's soloing, he's still doing stage raps. But Paul, and you learn this later on. I didn't know any of this stuff was rehearsed when I was a kid. I just figured, hey, this is the middle of a song. He just decided to make the audience start clapping or participating. And I think we've also learned over the years that Paul's stage raps are legendary when they're edited. He's much better served when they're edited. But I will say the stage rap in 100,000 years is absolutely brilliant, because again, it really is a song within the song, in terms of, Paul it's a certain rhythm to each of the lines, and then each of the audience responses back. And then behind him is Peter Criss drumming constantly, because it's coming out of his solo, but he's still playing. And as Paul's stage raps build, so does the intensity of the drums, where it's almost this tribal thing going on. Yeah. By the end, you're like, oh my God, it's insane.
And if you people talk, I just want to make a point real quick, and I want to come back to something that David said. But people talk about Freddie Mercury, and it's 100% true, being able to work a Wembley Stadium or this stadium or that stadium and have people right in the palm of his hand. When I listen to 100,000 Years on a Live, that's exactly what I think about Paul Stanley, because by the time he says, do you believe in rock and roll? Do you feel all right? Do you believe in rock and roll? Stand up for what you believe. By the time he says stand up for what you believe in, man. Now, I don't know how much of that was at that show that night, because there is some audience in there. But man, it's incredible. That is just what you said. That is such a perfect rhythm to that, that perfect cadence to that build up in the breakdown of that song. It's unbelievable. And David, I just wanted to clarify, I have no issue with the touch-ups on albums or anything like that. I was simply I wanted to make the point, because of what Don said about Peter. I've always felt the same way, that by and large Peter Criss was underrated, to put it respectfully. And I just feel like it really tells a good story about him, that, well, two things: that they were able to use those drum tracks unaltered to build any kind of studio stuff that they needed to do. And I agree with you 100%. That stuff needs to be done, because they're trying to give us all an experience, and they obviously did that, trying to create the experience of us being there. Secondly, I wanted to say with Peter Criss, to basically, if you go back, and I went and kind of searched this out, a reaction video that I found on Peter Criss's drum solo from Alive. One thing that I did not catch, and I believe it was from Alive, I hope I'm correct on this, but if you go back and listen to that drum solo, the best I could tell, the guy was playing straight triplets for that section you're talking about, Don. He's playing straight just triplets the whole time.
Yep.
He doesn't even really change what he's doing, but he works the entire kit from top to bottom, left to right, and just makes it a masterpiece. And like that is brilliance in the simplicity of it, man. That is rock and roll, just like what David was saying earlier. Just the simplicity of it, man, is mind blowing. So, thank you guys for all the profound points. If we could, real quick, let's do a speed of sound lightning round. I will kick this one off with Don. Don, we're going to start with you again. Best song or performance on Alive?
Oh, it's definitely 100,000 Years. I mean, they take a song that I'm not going to say it was a throwaway song, but it was just sort of an okay 2.5 minute song on the studio album, and they turn it into an epic journey between the drum solo and the rap and the guitar and everything, and they really turned it into something special. And the other quick thing I wanted to mention, because I noticed this recently, we talked about the flange on the drums.
Yeah.
If you notice, when they come back for the encores, which they do too, by the way, which is hysterical, but when the audience comes back in, they fade it in with the flanger. They're like, it sounded so good with the drums, we should put it on the audience.
Leave it to Eddie Kramer, man. Genius in motion. David, how about you?
I'd say Black Diamond. That is one song, just like 100,000 Years, and it's funny that they're back to back. It's epic. I mean, it's just there's so much dynamic. It's a journey. It's kind of I don't know if it's a stairway to heaven, but kind of. It's kind of that version, where and then the ending, of course, of Black Diamond. You can tell it's where the drum kit's going up in the air, right? I mean, in a modern day Kiss, right?
Yeah.
And the pyro and again, just it creates drama, very dramatic effect to that song.
For myself, thank you, David. For myself, I'm going She, as a young man of about 9-10 years old. The riff in that song, coupled with that Peter Criss Black and that just strutter style drums on there, the groove of the song and the riff, just that half step riff, man, it just hooked me. It's never let its teeth out of me. Next one, we'll start with David. David, most underrated song or performance on Alive?
Underrated.
Or you can say maybe most overlooked, if you feel like there's a track on there that's a bit overlooked.
I would say the song that I overlooked the most was "Let Me Go, Rock and Roll."
Okay.
It's my least favorite. It's, again, I guess, like you say, Don, it's a second encore, if you will. It's not my favorite song. So to me, I guess I overlooked it probably. Because especially following Rock and Roll All Night, I mean, that's the money shot right there, Yeah. So
Right, but it's funny they didn't know that back then, David. You know what I mean? Like, they figured we got to squeeze one more in there, and they did, and it's "Let Me Go, Rock and Roll." When everybody knows, if you go see Kiss now, when they break out "Rock and Roll All Night," it's over. That's the closer.
Confetti bombs. Yeah, they could have left it off the record, and I don't think the record would have suffered at all. That's my personal opinion.
But we didn't know back then, so we just figured, okay, So, but my overlooked thing, and I hate to keep harping on the same song, but I think we agree, like, the "She Watching You," 100,000 Years, Black Diamond section is the meat of the album. I think Paul's vocal performance on 100,000 Years is really powerful. Like, he's really.
Good point.
Like, it's his vocal on steroids, man. He is just really fucking going for it.
No, you're good, man. Whatever.
Okay, yeah, he's really effing going for it, man, in that one. So while I don't think it's an overlooked tune, just the vocal performance specifically on that one.
For me, I'm gonna go "Got to Choose." I think that "Got to Choose" back in the day, man, Cut Off Hotter Than Hell. I think if you take that song with different people behind the board and a little different strategy, I think that song could have been competitive in top 40. That's just my personal opinion. I think the hooks in that song, the vocal chemistry that they display in that song is just top shelf, and that one has always had a special place for me. Last one in the Speed of Sound lightning round. David, who goes down as the band MVP on Alive?
The band, what do you mean, the band MVP?
The MVP, as far as musical performance, as far as presence, as far as contribution to the to the art. You know, if you were to pick one player, one guy in Kiss who would go down as the MVP, could you pick one or two if you have a two-way tie?
I mean, I would say Paul, man. You know, I think Paul, you know, and again, as I read his book, it kind of brought out that he kept the band alive through the 80s, you know. Yeah. And you can tell there was definitely, you know, as Gene was dating Cher and movie stars and all being doing Hollywood, Paul kept the band going. You know, you realize Paul is the real rock star. He is the artist of the band. And there's a lot of celebrity in the band, which is great. Everybody's kind of a celebrity in their own right. And, but I think Paul, you know, really he's the engine of Kiss. He really is, you know. And he's kept the thing going from, I think he came up with the name, and he's really been, you know, the heart and soul of that thing through thick and thin, you know. And he's kept it. He looks as good as ever. He's kept himself in great shape. He's really dedicated his life to the craft of being a songwriter. He wrote with a lot of different people, Desmond Child, and a lot of different, you know, he stepped out of his comfort zone and had to reinvent Kiss a bunch of times too. And I just think, you know, I just have great respect for him, just as an artist, as a guitar player, and as a founder of a band. I think he's certainly won my respect.
Absolutely, man. I echo all those points. How about for you, Don Jamieson?
Well, Paul might have came up with the name, but Ace came up with the logo.
That's right.
So I'm going Ace again because you know, while we could all sing every lyric on every song on this album, we could also sing every lead guitar part on this album. The simplicity and the arrangement, and just the way Ace plays. You know, they say with any great guitar player, it's people think it's the hand that's on the fretboard, which is generally the left hand, but the real hardcore people tell you the sound all comes from the right hand, and all the pain and anguish and insanity of Ace's and the volume knob, the volume knobs, and the what do they call that? The tremolo thing. Yeah. That's all Ace's, you know, character in his right hand. Because when you go see Kiss now, obviously Tommy recreates the solos, but he can never play them like Ace can because he doesn't have Ace's right hand. So I give it to Ace. He said recently, also in an interview, he goes, I know I was a pain in the ass back then, and I was an F up and all this stuff. He goes, but, you know, if you go back and listen to concerts, you know, when I played, I was always on point. And he's right, because I go down a lot of old Kiss rabbit holes. And for all the trouble he was to Gene and Paul over the years, I defy you to find a live show where he doesn't bring it.
I agree 100% on both points. My personal choice, I'm also going to pick Ace, and really for one reason: for decades of influence that have followed after Kiss Alive, for all of the people who have wanted to pick up guitars. And that's not to say that people didn't want to pick up a guitar because of Paul, or pick up a bass because of Gene, or sit behind a kit because of Peter. Not saying that at all. But if you listen to the solos and you couple that with the character and the presence, I think the influence of Ace Frehley was at its highest and at its peak around Alive. Between Alive and Alive 2 for me personally. And And that's not discounting his solo album, because it was incredible, and he's making great albums today. So we will leave it there, gentlemen. In the wrap up, let me do this. Mr. Ellefson, I know you're stretched for time. Tell the listeners about No Cover, when and where they'll be able to get it, and where to find you online, so we can make sure you get some payoff for spending some time with us here today.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, everything for me, davidellefson.com is the main place. Everything pushes through there. Yeah, the Ellefson solo band No Cover album, which is 16 cover songs that we whipped up during our pandemic shutdown. That is, you can actually get a couple of tracks right now on Bandcamp. The whole record will be available on Bandcamp. I think it's bandcamp.com/Ellefson, something like that. It'll be out October 2nd. The full length will be out, and then it'll be, in all the digital outlets. And we are actually pressing vinyl CDs. So at the empmerch.com, we'll be there as well. But yeah, just go to davidellefson.com. That's where everything's at.
David Ellefson, I want to thank you for myself real quick for this piece of art.
Oh, yes.
that you've created, which is your ISP unit. And man, this thing, I don't want to mark out or go fanboy on you, but obviously you're an influence to me, and man, this thing is incredible. And I put that in one of my emails to you. I just want to say thank you, because this
and it matches your shirt, which is the beauty of it.
That is, and you know what? I didn't even plan, and that just shows you the brilliance of the rocker life. I didn't even plan that, man.
That's all part of the look of Combat Records. We kind of tied all this stuff into that. Yeah.
That's right.
So, but David, thank you very much for your time today. I sincerely appreciate it. And Mr. Don Jamieson, my friend, Denim and Laughter has just come out on vinyl. Tell the listeners, tell Rocker Nation about it and where to find it. Yeah, he's got it there to plug. I knew he would.
Nice.
I know. I am a plug whore, but we're talking about vinyl, and I love my vinyl. I love showing it. And I said, if I accomplish one thing in comedy, is I want to put out a record on vinyl. And so Denim and Laughter is out on vinyl. You go to experiencevinyl.com. That's our good friend Matt Sorum. It's his online vinyl shop. Experiencevinyl.com. I'll sign it. I'll personalize it. If you want me to write Don Jamieson sucks, I'll write that on it. But there's only 100 available. So pick one up. David, I'm saving one for Roman. So
thank you.
I'll be sending one along soon.
And I love that too. We reimagined and kind of paid an homage to the Def Leppard On Through the Night record. So I love,
Yes.
I'm taking a page out of your playbook, my friend. Of
I didn't want to take
ripping off our heroes.
I didn't want to take up your time, David. I know you got to go, man. And I'm sorry, but the cover is so incredible, because what I love is on the truck is that it's your Jackson bass on top of the truck. It's like a modern take.
Which I actually took right on my dining room table next door. I actually picked one of the basses up right here, and I took it over there with my iPhone, shooting it, going, I know how it should look coming off the back, So very much, I'm deeply invested in that cover.
That's great. It looks great.
It looks great. Yep.
It does. It really does. Hey, man, thanks to both you guys.